Good afternoon, everyone. So the drawback is that you have the choice of listening to me, but of course you could nod off completely because there's nothing to look at either. So I'm going to talk to you about artificial intelligence, but with a particular focus on trust, trustworthiness and trustworthy adoption. And although I agreed with Philip that AI would be my subject as an example of computable knowledge, I think the things I'm going to say would have echoes with every other form of computable knowledge. So I'd like you to wake up even if you're not developing AI. But we'll use AI as the excuse because on the one side, like a lot of health informatics, it's enjoying skiing the slope of the hype cycle, currently on its way up, and soon eventually it will come crashing down to an appropriate proportionate point. But it is important to look at the success factors. And what I would also like you to take as my 6 points, I want to give you 6 success factors, but you might also look at them as success factors for bringing up a child. So there is a little overlap there too. Number 1 is food. Now, we know that AI, to most people, except some of you clever folk in the room, is a kind of black box, an area of mystique where people have to trust something that they don't understand how it works. They can't even have transparent inspection about how it works. So they're going to be asked to trust what AI tells them to do, whether that's a piece of information, whether that's controlling a process, controlling a moving part in a robot or a syringe device. People are going to need to trust it. They can't look inside to see what's in it. Food is therefore critical. What is the data input on which AI has been learning? There is huge concern at the moment at a European level on that issue, to do with whether or not there is transparency from the AI developer of what kind of input data they have provided. For example, are there population biases? Are there ethnicity biases? Are there age group biases? Are there morbidity biases in the kind of data that the algorithm has been learning from, which means that eventually it might not be fit for a wider range of population uses than it was developed for. So this is a plea for transparency. Please also don't forget data quality, the quality of the food. If you feed in data that is rubbish, lots of missing or erroneous values, you will end up with an unschooled algorithm that eventually could be dangerous. Point number 2 is careful parenting. We know that the Medical Device Directive is much more endpoint than process assessment. And we know in general that endpoint assessment methods work very poorly with agile developments. And AI is, after all, agile. And we are therefore in a little bit of a conundrum right across Europe at how best to qualify the process and endpoint of developing an agile product. That also applies to many other knowledge resources, as you know. So it is going to be necessary that developers of AI are very clear about their process quality, but that needs to also include how are they building into that process quality an ability to detect erroneous trajectories. If the algorithm is starting to move in the wrong direction, do you have a strategy for dealing with it? Can you roll it back? Can it unlearn incorrect inferences so that it actually becomes trustworthy again? A little bit like, can you rid a computer of a virus? So those are issues that are troubling people across Europe when I speak to them about it. Point number 3, making friends. Again, you're thinking of children, aren't you? I hope. Making friends. AI components seem to be at the moment developed by quite small or quite large companies, both of which have a history of not being very good at playing in a multi-component space. The AI is going to receive data inputs, it's going to generate outputs that need to be transmitted and shared with other components. So we have to really strongly promote a standards landscape for AI. I don't mean what's inside the box, I mean what's outside the box and what the box talks to. We have to promote standards, and I've heard enough times today that same plea for other biomedical resources. If it's not standards-based and standards communicating, it will be very limited in where it can be adopted, and that will seriously hamper adoption and therefore trust. Life partnerships. So we do expect eventually our children will do things like that. There are many passionate people I encounter in AI who tell me how what they're inventing can replace people. Not many organizations in healthcare today are ready to rip and replace their humans. They don't feel they can trust AI enough to do that. They don't feel they want to disrupt their environment enough to do that. So AI, to be successful, needs to be designed with partnership in mind. It needs to be designed to cooperate with people, not to get rid of people. And I know the passionate techies think that they can do things better than humans. But at the moment, the market's not really ready for that. And you need to be sensitive to that. And that takes me to the last thing. The last aspiration a parent might have for their kids is that those kids go on to make a contribution to society. And here again, very often, the tension I'm hearing is that the AI developers are passionate to do something in what they consider either to be an easy area, because it's computationally easy or the data's available, whatever, or it happens to be what their PhD was in, or they think that it's kind of glamorous and would look appealing and exciting. Healthcare organizations that are going to invest in AI need to see the business value. That means the solution has got to be addressing a healthcare need, preferably one where without that additional support, we're not doing very well. In other words, it needs to make a difference to healthcare, healthcare delivery, and to patient outcomes, not just to be a gratuitous substitution of a person to do the same job a little bit slicker, but where actually the underlying problem wasn't so bad. So targeting real health needs. Why? Because I'm hearing, not just in the West, but also from low middle income countries, a real pain of decision making about whether they should risk scarce financial resources in an AI type solution. And they really need to know this is going to make a difference to their patient population, their health system. So that's almost closing for you on a moral point. But I would like you to see those as success factors attributed in this piece to AI. But I would also like to say, as an old geezer in this field, that health informatics as a discipline is really fond of skiing the hype cycle. And those are points that I have often not seen well addressed in other computable biomedical knowledge initiatives. So it's a challenge actually to all of you. Thanks very much. So will it be questions or heckling? I'm not sure which.
You can divide, please. Questions or heckling?
I think there are quite a lot of us in this room that have been doing something around this area for many decades. And you mentioned standards. And I must say, one of my greatest regrets is seeing really motivated clinicians and informaticians, championing their own baby at conference, after meeting, after workshop. And, there's lots of talking and presenting and hardly any listening. And as a result, we have a proliferation of standards. And I heard somebody talking about, letting multiple flowers bloom and what have you. My problem is that, if we create yet more standards, we again will go nowhere. So can we first look to see what we've got and what perhaps is good enough for us actually in a short time, not 2 years, but in 2 weeks, 2 months, apply a bit of lean agile to this process.
I would absolutely agree with you, but I'd like to also point out that actually I deliberately didn't put it that way. I didn't refer to the standards for AI becoming invented as another brave portfolio to add to the long list, but that the developers should adhere to the standards in the ecosystem that they will connect to. So it's not about inventing another swathe of standards. It's about adopting the standards in the landscape so you become a good citizen as a component in the space. And I think that good citizenship of component development is needed. It's not about what standards you might or might not adopt, but are you playing in a collaborative space? Or as you might say to a school child, as I was trying to imply, are you making friends?
Sorry, I've got to react to that because, the great thing about standards is so many to choose from. That's right, so many to choose from. And in the environment that you're working in, the ecosystem that you're working in, that you're advocating, there's going to be a whole string of standards. And I think I'd support what Tim was saying. You've got to put your hand up and say, this is the set of standards we're going to use. And I think if we're looking for things that this group might do, putting its hand up and saying, right, we're going to go with SNOMED, we're going to go with this, and we're going to go that, for each of the different components would be a very constructive thing to do.
That might be the case, Hugh, but it wasn't, really it's not the point I want to make. I'm not here saying let's either invent standards or let's choose them. What I'm saying is the purchaser who wants to adopt an AI component wants to be able to say, can I plug this in to the infrastructure I've already got? And can I connect the data feeds? Can the advice get persisted in my repository? So the end user is not interested in the inventory of standards, even though it's necessary. The end user wants to say, can I plug and play? And it's up to the developer of components to then nominate the standards they support so that the end user can know what can I plug this in and play with it. And then it's up to this community to do what you said.
Thank you. Last one.
I haven't heard you talk about the IHD Interoperability Asset Register, which would obviously be a tool for doing just that. I wondered how that's doing and whether you see it playing a role in helping that.
Well, it's kind of you to mention. In fact, if you did ever go on to the Washington trip and look at my video, there I did have a bit longer and I did mention it. But yes, I mean, much of the lessons learned in what makes for trustworthy knowledge resources came from developing that. So we've created a register which is not rich and full with content, I'm afraid, because we're lacking a champion to take it forward, but where there is metadata that is like a transparency metadata. It says, if I've built a knowledge object of some kind, a knowledge resource of some kind, can I describe it with a set of metadata about its development process, its adoption experience, evaluations that show how good or bad it is, endorsements from bodies that have said, we think this meets our needs, so that somebody who wants to browse and find one can know on what basis they should use it. And I think that's something that this community should also think about.
Thank you.